or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up its soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully, he shall receive the blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. I'm going to be reading verse 6. This is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob, a portion of God's holy word. And now I invite us to bow in prayer. Lord, we are so grateful that under these circumstances, you have still afforded us the opportunity to gather ourselves together in thanksgiving, in gratitude to you for delivering us through our forbearance from the wicked and brutal treatment of slavery. We are on the eve of our emancipation, and we are grateful, God. Lord, we thank you that in your mercy you look down as you did to the Israelites. You saw and you heard the suffering and the cries of our people. Welcome those who will be viewing. It is my distinguished honor to welcome this evening's moderator, who is indeed a woman of the soil. She wears many hats. She is indeed an eloquent individual and indeed an educator. And I probably should say an educator by birth and nature, having worked in many areas of our educational life in this country. She is indeed former principal at the Jacks River Primary School, guidance counselor, and special education teacher. She is also a former festival queen who represented the parish of St. Mary. She is happily married and the mother of a beautiful girl. I almost say a beautifully grown girl. She is indeed a Christian, and that I believe is an outstanding characteristic of her life. A member of this very church where she serves as part of the praise team and is now serving as coordinator of the youth department. Brothers and sisters, friends all, so much that I could have said this evening, but sufficient is this. I introduce to you our moderator for this forum, let me say Sister Simone Smith-White, who I know is more than capable of guiding us. Put your hands together and welcome her.
For life, let me take the opportunity to say that I am delighted not just to be a part of this in terms of us having a panel discussion surrounding emancipation, but also be sitting in a Baptist church while I am doing so. And you will understand why as we have the discussions a little bit later, because I am proud not just to be Jamaicans, but to be a part of the Baptists. Yes, and the Baptists were very instrumental in bringing about the emancipation of not just those of us who are worshiping in church, but of the entire Jamaica as a nation. And so as we take the discussions a little bit further, we want to bring to your mind the fact that a lot of people believe that emancipation did not just take place physically, but it also took place in the mind of the people. It almost became a psychology, and so though the chains are being physically removed from the people, some of us are still in a state of mind that we have still not yet been emancipated. And so we're going to shed some light on that, and we're going to take perspectives from those of us who are older, and as well as those who are younger, and would have been seeing the whole thing enacted right around us. And so I'm going to ask my panelists at this time to just give a short introduction of themselves, to say your name and what is it that you do. Starting with my panelists on my immediate right.
My name is Trevor Lee, and I serve in this church in the youth department. I also study at the Jamaica Theological Seminary, where I'm studying to be a social worker.
Alright, good evening everyone. My name is Rashida Williams, and I just completed my Bachelor's of Law.
Congratulations, Rashida. And of course, our Reverend needs no introduction. Just tell me a little bit, as much as you can remember, about what does emancipation mean to you? What are some of the practices that you see coming up, or what your grandparents or your parents would have passed on to you about emancipation?
Personally, there were a lot of traditions that we grew up on, and we know at this time, normally at this time, my grandmothers they would start to sing certain songs. They started to sing the freedom songs, and they used to tell us the history, go back to the issue of what it meant for them and for their mothers and fathers. And we grew up having many different interpretations, because as Sister Simone said earlier, it is also a mind. And if you weren't emancipated from here, you would not be able to celebrate it in the way that you ought to. So I know personally that's one of the things I would hear older folks say. It was not only the physical, but also for us to remember that we are free. Because even though we still have some tendency of still to have to kind of what you say, still be bound to certain things. But I think the traditions growing up were hearing, we used to hear about the stories, the slavery days, we used to tell you what it meant, where they're coming from, what this meant, and give you a detailed background. So that's what I grew up on. And at this time you see places decorated in the Jamaican colonies, and we have different celebrations, we'll have parties, we'll have vigils. Growing up, this was one of the celebrations that I grew up on. We would meet at the church and we would sing out some of these hymns, sing out some of these choruses, and we would remember what our forefathers did for us. So, yeah.
Thank you, Brother Jeffrey. So, Rashida?
Okay, so for me personally, I'm always reminded when it's this time that as Caribbean people, we are known for our resilience, our courage, and our ability to fight for freedom. When it comes around to emancipation, you just look back on what your ancestors did. They saw a system of injustice. They saw a system of oppression. They saw a system where it was cruel and inhumane, and they did what they had to do for us to be free today. And every year I'm reminded of that, and that fight continues today.
Okay, thank you. All right, Red, it's over to you.
Well, what growing up in the country and more so in St. Thomas and the on the estate that, well, you understand that growing up on the Sugar Estate in St. Thomas for us would have brought us a little closer, if you may, to our history. This would have been a time of jubilation and celebration. We call it 1st of August. And 1st of August, people really don't want to work at this time. Particularly 1st of August, today being Friday, it would be payday, we would call it. And thus, like this morning, nobody would have gone to work. They would have been in their best clothes. And in some instances would be celebrated with coming up from the east. People would be having stuff like chocolate tea and so, but uppermost in the minds of individual is indeed our emancipation from slavery. And while some of the images of slavery would have remained with us, the plantation and the difficulty in working on the plantation, this would have been a time where people would ease back, if you will, from their much work, and a time of just celebrating. I remember all of that, just celebrating, having, as I said, the best of what it is that you're able to afford, because, look here, a 1st of August, and 1st of August means celebration, a lot of celebration, yes.
Thank you, Rev. It's key for me to zoom in on that, because you were talking about this thing back from work, and today we have that privilege of having that day off to stay away from work and not going out and having the celebration. But the celebrations for a lot of us, I know especially for Rashida and B, you would have seen that a lot of people tend to want to go to the beach and so on. So it's a different kind of celebration people are really having. So when it touched on the church being used, well, at this time, if our audience could see, we would see the Jamaican colors, being projected right here. But we go far back as to those like Thomas Burchell and Samuel Sharp and William Knibb was built by slaves led by William. And so we have quite a lot of history going back into the Emancipation period. And we spoke about being the festival queen and Emancipation really tend to want to give spirits and doing a lot of those things in terms of the celebration. But what I want to find out from my panelists though,
if you would permit me,
yes.
I think there's an element of it that I have left out, because even the spirit of the celebration with the going out, with Jamaican food and so forth, church and worship was also a high celebration during August.
Right.
That if there was a time that people would not have attended worship service, it would not be August Sunday, meaning that this Sunday coming would be celebrated as August Sunday, and you could bet that church would have been filled to capacity. Whatever it is, a person that put on their best to be in church, and interestingly, some people even work barefooted, but having on their best clothes, because you must appreciate that there was indeed an era where a lot of poverty prevailed in Jamaica. But to say the least, it is the best that you would have, that you would have going to church. Your best shoes, your best that, and those without would not cause it not the church was indeed a big part of the celebration of emancipation, because God must be praised for delivering God's people. So that is something that we
Thank you for pointing out that word, because it was the 1831 acts of our church leaders that brought us to the point of getting that proclamation made in 1834, just to actually having that emancipation. But I want to find out from a perspective towards a young man, a young woman, a man in the field. I want your perspective of the implications that emancipation has for you.
When I start to look on this and to examine what it meant or the implications that it had, I came up with 3 to 4 points. Identity, a sense of freedom, and an opportunity to be educated. And being emancipated gave us, we'd say, a sense of our own identity. Because for years upon years, we were misrepresented, we'd say, misrepresented, but we were under an identity of the slaves and the slave masters, and we had that. And we were not identified individually. It was a group, all of us slaves. It wasn't Simone, it wasn't Bashida, it wasn't Red, it wasn't Pete.
Right, you were giving a slave master's name. So like my name Smith was a slave master's name. So every slave on the plantation would name Smith.
Yes.
Right.
So being emancipated, you got the opportunity to have your own personal identity. So you were no longer Smith, but you were Simone White. You had the opportunity to have your own personal identity. And you go back to freedom. You are free to do what you can. And if we look back on, especially to take it from the family aspect of things, back then, family is all the way in Montego Bay. You weren't the family aspect of things. You weren't allowed to have your family because you're working here, you get moved from this plantation to a next plantation. You didn't have the freedom of spending that time with your family, the freedom of doing as you please. So being emancipated gave us that freedom. And from the young man's perspective was that the adults would have been somewhat still in certain identity. But when it came on to our era, and I think Rashida can agree, when it came on to our era, we were allowed to have our own identity. We were allowed to move, or we were allowed to form and to be free. Because you can agree that back when we were emancipated, there were some things that lasted for a little while. Certain traditions, certain things lasted for a little while. But our generation, we did not have that to come back because our persons would have cleared the way for us. So when
you speak about certain things, what are some of these things that you are talking about?
So you would talk about, and I'd go back to the freedom aspect of it. We are now allowed to do what we can. We are allowed to.
I mean, like freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. You can go about your daily business. You can do as you please. Our being emancipated gave us that right. And I was sitting and I was reflecting that maybe when we were emancipated, as I said just a while ago, certain things lasted for a while. So it would be us, our generation would basically live and embrace the full emancipation because we are free. We are no longer bound to a certain standard, a certain regime. We were allowed to do as we can. And an opportunity to be educated. Education is a key factor. And if you look back into the history, and even when you started, you said something about the Baptists. The Baptists played an important part in the education aspect of slaves. And we look back and you mentioned names like Sam Sharp, William Nick, and so on. Back then, the slave masters never wanted the slaves to be educated. Because once they were educated, they knew what was right. They knew that they don't have to live up to this. They knew what they could do, and so on. So the slave masters limited them from having the necessary education that they needed. So that is the reason why us today, we can celebrate and enhance the freedom of going to school, the freedom of going to the classroom, going to college, going to different places. Because back then, our forefathers did not have that privilege. Because to be a slave anymore. Because I have my own education, I know what is what. So those were the three things that, and one more, reluctant to conform. We did not have to conform to the slave master's standard. We did not have to conform to any plantation standards or whatever. We don't have that to be conformed by. We have our freedom. And it is for us as young people, even though times have passed, it's for us to remember and to sit and look on what this means and embrace it to the fullness of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're going to touch back on some of the issues as we move along. But we want to give each of the panelists a chance to talk. And so Rashida will touch on what implication it has for her as a young woman.
I agree with Brother Keith as to the opportunities that emancipation paved the way for. I will also expound on the fact that as a young girl, I can now see myself becoming who I want to be or who God wants me to be. I don't have to be thinking, what is this person going to do to me if I want to go and read a book? I can now freely be educated. I can move upward, social mobility. I don't have to be confined to that system of poverty. I don't have to be mentally captivated that, okay, this is going to be, I'm just born to serve a man. My identity is no longer found in a husband or basically being on a plantation and working for the whites. I am free. I will also touch a bit on liberty because I think sometimes we confuse liberty with emancipation. Emancipation is the foundation that you can build on to be free. But if you're still mentally in captivity, you are still not free. And if it is that the laws are still not basically showing what freedom should show, you're still being bound by a system of oppression. And so I think emancipation was very important to basically creating that foundation that we can now build on and become a free people. And I think as young women, we still have a lot to work on because we are still bound by some ideas and some traditional rules and so forth.
Yes, well, because Rashida, because I'm still seeing some of the ideas existing because some women still feel as if their place is in the home to procreate and the man go out and work and carry home the money and all of these things and so on. So do they have that freedom? No. Some people cannot take that side of things because, on the plantations, the women were seen as, that opportunity to, like Sheena, would be ready to, bring forth young ones because we were counted by heads. And the men were used mainly for the purpose of procreation, so they were never really in any home setting before emancipation. So the home wasn't the place for them. And if you read the book, While Men Stay So, you would have realized that some of those practices that they're saying, while men are not more visibly in the family, is because of those old practices back then. But without touching on those, I am going to go to you for you to give your perspective before we dive a little bit more into this. And we're going to be asking our audience while you're listening. Maybe there are questions in your own minds that you would want to ask.
perspective, I probably can only draw based on my position here this evening and some of the things that would have been said. Because the whole thing of slavery would have negatively impacted, the male image in the family, the male image as God would have intended it to be, because we have rightly said, and Pete would have said something earlier, that there was not this sense of a family. The male was indeed the worker and the one who multiplies. It's in a nice word. The term that is used is stud.
Right.
And so chiefly the man is the stud, the man is the worker. So that sense of care, that sense of family, was not there, was not nurtured in that way. And you see the implications today, because very often, contrary, probably you may say that we have gone through different phases, since our emancipation, because, Rashida said there was a time that the woman's place was considered in the home. The man would go out and the man would work. Well, that's work, while the woman would stay at home. Certainly, we see a shift in this kind of, the way that the family is structured.
Right.
Because we see the women now becoming the instances, still there is the loss of the male identity. What we find a lot of our young men are doing now is that the bleaching, the leading, the hanging out on the roads and so forth. So the women are really excelling. And I hope I don't carry us through. You can guide me. Some time ago, I stood deliberately at the gate of the University of the West Indies, and I started counting that afternoon the number of women and men who would have been going through the gate, coming and going through the gate of university. And, it was like 4 to 1. And 4 to 1. That just a rough, just 4 to 1. And therefore, that's the ratio.
Yes.
It's an indication of the upward mobility in terms of the women today. We find the men are still struggling in terms of maintaining that presence, that care, because this was never instilled in the new world, if you mean the world of slavery.
Yes.
So we, sometimes we talk about, and I heard somebody said today, all men are worthless and so forth. And I listened and I said, no, not all men are worthless. You have some men, still some good men.
Right.
But the long and short of it is that while not using it as an excuse, it is part of the reality of what slavery has done to our male. But I go further to say that I can't see slavery as nothing less than the devil himself, Satan, trying to mess the plan of God for the human family, degrading our men, and also, if you may, placing our men in a position that the man would no longer be the prophet, the priest, and all that kind of responsibility that would have been entrusted to the men. And so we live with that reality. Only we give God thanks that for those of us as men who have put our faith and our trust in God, we have indeed been delivered, set free from this tarnished image that slavery has brought upon us. And we continue to live, as it were, in the freedom that comes from knowing the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's my position at this point. So some of us are no longer studs, as it were, but we are doing something is populating the kingdom of God rather than just populating the human family. So yes,
that's fine.
I hear somebody's buffering with the term.
That's a good way to end your position, rest. Yes, but it's very interesting, and I want those who are not tuning in to really be in tune with the discussions that we're having, because there are some points that were brought to the fore. You spoke about the whole bleaching thing, because we have this mentality that if you're black, you stay back, and if you're white, you're right, and you're in the position. And we want, does this position still exist with a lot of people today?
If you permit me, Madam Moderator, at the heart of this bleaching is the identity crisis. That's how I see it. It's the identity in terms of that male identity. It's as though we have lost our maleness, because it's not just bleaching.
Yes.
The men are weaving and plaiting. I was turning somewhere the other day. Yes, the gate was blocked, and it was blocked with a woman weaving, as it were, the air of a big, strong black man who you would have imagined would have been, portraying the image of what we would see as strong African. The men are almost everywhere. The women are found in the beauty shops and so on. So clearly, it is indeed a loss of our maleness.
Yes. Because I think they're really trying to be like the woman, because as I said, the women have taken the forefront. We have lost it somewhere along the line with a lot of men and women too, and we don't want to get it wrong, because a lot of us have esteem issues, not having confidence in self, and so we're not comfortable with ourselves. As somebody say, you're not comfortable in your own skin, and so you're trying to put on another skin, because some of the men tend to let the women feel as if they have a lighter skin, then they are, more likely to get a proposition than if they are dark skinned. And before you touch on that, because I want you to touch on that, your own feelings on it. Because today I was traveling in a taxi, and the lady was speaking about her children and her grandchildren, and she was talking about how pretty the grandchild is because the child is grown. You understand? And she was saying, boy, don't get grown. And he said, I have 3 children, but one, she grown and she pretty, and the other 2, they're black and ugly. And I was really, like you, she said yes, because her skin is dark. And I said to her, you know what? I have always said to myself, if I'm getting another skin tone, I would want to be dark. So I don't really show wrinkles. But here it is that she was thinking that this one that is very light skinned is going to bring the family out. It's going to bring a newness, because the children from this generation will be lighter, and they will be having more opportunity, because she dark and she ugly. That's how she described herself. I don't know. What are your perspectives on it?
Personally, I think that this is something that has struggled with us from slavery days, and it is still existing in today's society, and it is sad. I feel as a black woman sometimes when I'm on the road, you'll have a person saying, "Oh, you're pretty from black girl, you know." And I'm like, what's that supposed to mean? and, and also, you find a lot of persons saying that brown and chrome skin, and you're chrome down, and you're well, you're nice. When you have a black woman, they'll say, "She alright," or whatever.
Yes.
But your skin color, once you're a bit lighter, then basically in today's society needs more opportunities. And so you'll find a flashy car stopping at your foot, maybe more than a regular black woman just walking around. Also, I feel like in the school system, where on the university level, I see that day on day to day, basically a lot of girls, they'll wear makeup and they'll tell you that why I wear makeup is basically I don't feel cute and I feel like the makeup may look kind of prettier and it makes me brown, basically. And so you put on the makeup from up here so down to your neck so it cover and matching back down here so that is much lighter. I think personally I suffered from identity crisis when I was younger because I was born in a family where my brother is a bit lighter, my mom is a little bit lighter, but my ancestors coming down, they were from this white and Irish and whatever. And so I was often referred to as you're black and up like your papa, like your papa. And so I grew up feeling as if I wasn't enough. And so I had to basically break down that barrier and build up my self-esteem. And so I found myself, I basically refused to wear makeup for a while so that I could regain my identity. And then now I just basically wear it just because. But whereas before it was basically because I wanted to be like who they want me to be, basically.
Right. Wow. That is powerful because
Yes.
that can, you used it, you broke down the barrier and you gain a positive sign to it. But can you imagine how much young people are really struggling because they feel now as if they are outcasts because they don't have the ideal look and they tend to feel as if they are trapped inside their bodies. But there's the other perspective too because you have a lot of black people who feel very white inside and we do a lot of bad things to each other, even in this time when you're watching what is happening in other parts of the world where black people are going through hardship, even in this time, even after the whole period of emancipation and independence and so on. Pete, did you want to shed a little light on what we're talking about before?
Or you want me to, I can continue on the point that you just made. With persons struggling in other countries, and if we had for the month of June, it was May, June, we had the whole Black Lives Matter being an hashtag, and we had the Black Hole Days, we had a whole heap of things that we had to do because of what was happening in America. For many of us who saw what happened with the black man, George Floyd, who was practically killed by officers. And it is a sad thing that persons had to get up and march and protest and do all manner of things just to be accepted. All of these things just to be recognized for who we are as black persons. And I was reading something recently, and one of the famous actors said that she's afraid to have a child because of what persons might do to her daughter, because she's black.
Yes.
And that is a sad place for us to reach in society. And it is even reflected here in Jamaica, that it is very much reflected here. And many persons, when the movement started, many persons were wondering why we are taking up something that is in the US but it's also something that we affects us here. And we have to look within our culture, look within and see why people get better jobs, why people do this. The society paints the image of them moving forward than the black person. And as a young person, I'll speak personally, if you follow society, you will be doomed and lost. Yes. And something, the identity. And it is good for you to find the identity, the personal identity, and also to find the identity in God. Yes. Very important, because society will dictate to you how you're supposed to live and operate. And what society do, society is always changing. Yes. So today, white, black is accepted, tomorrow might not. Today, this should be accepted, tomorrow it's not. And for all those years and for all those times, you will still be trying to meet up to the standards of society. Yes. And that is not something for us to do. Or being emancipated, our own image, our own identity. That is an important aspect of it. Knowing who you are, because you cannot follow society. And we have to take it on ourselves. Personally.
I'm going to ask you to hold that a little bit. Because yes. I wonder now, because from your perspective, sir, because what do you think? Because though it has an implication on us, what does it mean for us as adults? What is our own responsibility in all of this in terms of preserving what is our heritage or our history, in terms of passing on this information so people can understand why is it that we really have emancipation? Because some people really don't understand, that it is more than just a day to relax. They need to understand the true meaning of emancipation.
Yes, thank you. You're asking what it is that as adults we can do to advance the cause of emancipation. Right. Rashida said something that's very, very profound. She spoke about, not in her exact word here, but that pressure of identity and, her own struggle, right. With that sense of self. But I have picked up from her conversation that a part of the process of our own emancipation and that sense of our own, educational, standard, educational experience. She was able to educate herself. Where she should have been able to mingle with the brightest of minds, even though she would have been young. I believe that as adults, a part of our responsibility is education. Education. Do all that we can to educate our children, because they are going to be the ones that will be able to carry the torch. We are still struggling with that same kind of identity struggle. So I believe that in terms of the education of our people, that is why we believe that even though we have been deeply affected by this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, that there is a responsibility that we have to our people. Those who are here and those who are listening to say, look here, hey, emancipation, not just as an activity, but it's creating an awareness that we who were slaves, we are now free people. Right. And we have a place on the global stage as we indeed educate ourselves to stand with the mighty and the great of our world. So we have that responsibility, if you ask me, as others. I remember, if you would permit me just for a few more seconds, that school for many people was not their priority. You are done with grade 6 or whatever class that used to be, and you're out. You go do sewing, you go do dressmaking, tailoring, shoemaker, learn trade. The whole thing at that time, very few people were able to go up through the educational system and then realize that struggle. Some people went to school so badly, so poorly. Fridays, for example, typically there was no school for many individuals because education was sort of slighted. Right. Yes? But now we realize that we are a more educated society. Regardless of the challenges we have with crime and violence, even in terms of the political violence, you realize that that is not even as bad, this one from it to turn, as it was like in the late 70s to the early 80s, because people are more educated. Right. And so I believe that we have a contribution to make as adults to ensure that the culture is passed on to the generations coming after us, so that they, being the brighter generation, will carry that torch of liberation. That's for me.
Okay.
A possible way that we can. Yes.
Before we just do our final wrapping up, I know that persons in the audience might have questions. While you think about it, I want to pass on some information to you though, because emancipation for a lot of people mean a sense of pride, having ambition, and to be successful. Before emancipation, there was no sense of that, because you would just get up every day knowing that it is mandatory for you to go and work. Whether you're sick, or you're lame, or you're feeling hungry, you had to go. So no money, not much was given to them. Back then too, they used to work still probably 18 hours out of the 24 hours of the day. Yes, and so it was the emancipation that brought about the 40-hour work week for a lot of people that we now come to see as a privilege to work 8 hours per day. Now, had it not been for the fight of a lot of these people that stood up and, some people call it W, because you remember all of these ancestors who really, a lot of them lost their lives, lost family, lost their privileges, just to get what we have. And it's always a passion for me to see that children, some of them really don't regard education, though they fought hard and long for us to be educated. Because remember back then, a lot of people had to kind of go across the bush, hide in the bush at night to really educate people. Probably going to go back with torch and so on, pretending sometimes to read the Bible with them, just to pass on education. And we have so much privilege now, so that we cannot just get work on a plantation, or we can get work in business places. When the emancipation period came, and a number of them became teachers and preachers and started working in business places. You probably could go on some cane and so on, yes. But they were able to do this. They were now able to live in homes where they could live in a room by themselves and not bundle up with everybody else. You understand? We moved from the era of the dirt floor, right? And we can now trade with other countries. So it's a lot of things for us. It's a lot of upward movement for us as free citizens, knowing that we have these privileges. So I'm going to entertain a couple of questions and answers just to wrap this up, and then we can close off. But I hope that those who are watching are not really just sitting and just looking, but getting a lot from what we are seeing. Any questions? Or comments?
When you're entertaining those emancipation,
Right.
movement. And it is painful today to see how silent the church is in terms of some of the atrocities and the injustices and the harsh treatment being meted out to our citizens. We need to understand that the church was not merely political. The church was spirit-led. Many of what we have now coming from our pulpits and from many of us as preachers is more or less taking a political stance rather than being the advocates for truth and justice and righteousness, and I'm becoming very wary how backward the church has become, and if we are not careful, that the church becomes a part of the system that oppresses the people. We have taken a backward step when we have allowed the politicians to be leading where the church led in the past. And it is the wonder that the church don't have the kind of traction that it had, whether you want to believe yes or no, pre and post emancipation. Because people looked to the church. The church was a voice. The church would have been the hands and the eyes and the ears and the other people. But the church has bowed down and we are lost in that system. So I just thought that we need to make that very clear, that as we celebrate emancipation, it's a call for the church to get back to that place where we are able to look out for our brothers and sisters in difficulties, rather than just being part of the political establishment. When it's not this side, it is the other side. I don't believe that God is calling us to be on any side except his side, and to stand and to speak truth. Some would say to power, be true to power. But we need to speak the truth of God, as it is related to all section of society.
Where our role is, or how much what happened in the past would have affected us, because other parts of the world would have looked at Jamaica and model what we have in terms of what we were having in terms of rebellion. They now used to call it protest in other parts of the world. But it was these same Baptist deacons and Baptist leaders that started the rebellion, the revolts. And if you read all of that in these books that are written, one was written by Levan, I think too, where they led this march, Paul Bogle and the rest, and Tappy. You understand? And these were the reasons why we got the emancipation in the first place. And if the day of the emancipation, the celebrations and the marching in the street were led by the Baptist congregation, and they went to the church and so on in Spanish Town, and they went out, to have that impact. 3 years later, because they started it in 1831, but the reality did not come until 1834. So it was 3 years later, after the arrest of these Baptist leaders and so on, that the emancipation came. But though these men, some of them would have lost lives and so on, we still have a lot of legacy, and I think it's still important. So those of us who get the opportunity to go out and to vote and to do these things need to take a stand, because they get a grand opportunity. I see an hand in the audience, and so
it seems as if Reverend Williams was reading my mind, because that's exactly what I was going to ask him, if he believed that as Baptists we are continuing in the footsteps of our foreparents or Baptists who have gone on before, because as you said, they were the ones who put up that fight so that we can benefit from what we have here today.
Yes.
Right. So I was asking if we are continuing in that tradition, as Baptists.
I say, I think, again, I make the point that we have become more political than being that prophetic voice in this environment. So a lot of the noise that you hear from the church is more political than just being a prophetic voice to the people. I remember, saying even to the local Baptist here in St. Mary, that having gone out to the town of Port Maria and seeing the suffering of our senior citizens standing in lines, in the sun. I remember seeing a lady, standing across the road that would have normally been in the bank, seated waiting on a number. And this person could not have stood there any longer and went up to the bank to ask the security, here's a seat, just allow me, this is my number. And she was told, no. And I said, how can we, the people of God, so many churches in and around Port Maria, and there is no movement to identify, to point out to. I heard that comment just, I think, yesterday or day before yesterday by Fitz Jackson about what we have seen in the public space, not just without masks, but the kind of, disregard, if you may, but the church has just not taken it on. We are waiting for the politicians to lead, and in some cases, we as Baptists speak about being part of umbrella group. So we are no longer the voice of God speaking up on behalf of the people who are lost in the system. And I speak maybe because of the blood of Paul over somewhere in St. Thomas. I just feel very strongly that when we see injustice being meted out, we must stand as a church, stand with people. We are not only called to preach Jesus Christ and to baptize people, but we are called upon to help people and to liberate and to speak on behalf of the people. When we hear the people crying, we want justice, we must listen to the cry. Hundreds of years ago, we want freedom. We want freedom. The church must listen and to identify and to say what it is that is happening here. Rather, we are part of the system if you are not careful oppressing the people. And it's a far cry from where we started and how we started as Baptists in Jamaica. And I really hope that, in this period of emancipation, we will get back, rediscover.
Right. Earlier, he said something in regards to males and their hair. I want to say and then ask, just this is short here. When the slaves were taken from their different tribes and so on, we have to remember that they had their different cultures. So some of them probably grew their hair, some of them did not have any hair growing. And it was said that some, their hair were cut as to, what do you call it now? Remove strength from them, or to remove them from what they had in their tribes, so that they would feel as if they were no longer of any connection to their home, and so that they could control them, right? But I want to know why it is that we now look at males growing their hair as something feminine, when in the Bible, yes, there were many men who actually grew their hair. I want to know if it is a thing that we are now taking what they had something that is so wrong that we must protest against them growing their hair?
In my judgment, had nothing to do with the growing of hair, locking hair, or so forth.
Right.
The issue raised is that the identity crisis, where it is, we have said, the men can be found in the beauty salon, doing all the things that the ladies are doing, including weaving their hair and doing all that. And for me, it is a matter of an identity crisis. So it has nothing to do with whether or not we men do, because still a lot of men in Jamaica wear the long hair.
Right. Well, it's a matter of extension. They're putting on extension and so on.
Right. So for me, it is so if in our culture and our time, grooming our hair, because you can well appreciate at this point that a well-groomed hair in Jamaica, not mine, a well-groomed hair in Jamaica would not be seen as a man being less than who he is, nor would you now, based on how we have it, a person lacking, because women lacking and men lacking will not make you less. I was really bothering and touching on what I call that loss of identity, where you're walking on the road and you don't know whether or not it is a male. The pants is as tight as the female. The male shaving their eyebrow and doing all kind of other stuff, not just wearing earring, but seem to me that if you are not careful, even carving their bodies to look like a woman. And for me, it is where I now say that we have lost that manliness, that male identity to which we have indeed, because what we are seeing now, we can't even say is linked to Africa. It is like it's a new culture that is emerging. And I know you say you want to wrap this up, but I really want it to, because for the younger ones on the panel that might know that I learn a lot from the younger people. We speak about a time when you say, well, because your skin is, you have a skin tone that is lighter. The proposal, I can't remember who said it, would have come quickly. A car would draw you, get the invite, so that a man looks on a brown-skinned woman as the ideal, pretty woman. I am now wondering what it is that now cause a man. Is it that the women now are demanding that the women have the clear bleed skin? I really don't know. Is that now a requirement? Is it that the tables of turn? That I really don't know, because it is surprising that even today, somebody that I thought I knew for some time, and I did not realize that it was the same person, because the person has a complete makeover, like a plastic surgery, from a dark individual to a very clear, well, brownish reddish, that kind of thing. I don't get that kind. So that's what I'm really talking here about.
Right.
That's what I'm talking here about. That's what I'm talking about.
So a lot of it might necessarily resonate probably still the mentality. As how we started, same way we're finishing. The mentality of a lot of people has still not changed. And the psychology of emancipation, a lot of enslavement really took place in the mind. I'm sure that everybody gets a fair chance of just closing out. So 30 seconds for each of our panelists as we close off.
Let's see if I can keep it to the 30 seconds. But one of the things I want for us to do as a country, as a church, many times we have things named after have Emancipation Day, but we have lost the legacy, the history, the tradition. We have lost it. Even where we have our former Baptist ministers and leaders, they never alluded to it, and it's something I think I and others in my age will have to have our voice to be heard that hey, the Baptist, the church, if we want to be specific the Baptist, but the church still has a role to play, and our voices must be heard, and we must not water down or try to get rid of the rich history that we have, because it is what we grew up on. Personally, when I was going to high school, I did history, and in history this was an aspect of it, and I was known in the class to be the Baptist person, and that's how I formed my identity. I did not know that the Baptists did so much. The Baptists were so instrumental in a lot of basic things in society. Right. And that is for us as young people. We have to know what history and know what it did and align ourselves so we can move on with that voice and not be shut up by society.
Alright, so that is the version of 30 seconds. Oh, look, it's right this time. I wonder if we should use the modern technology, which is a phone, and not, we're not looking at the sun, because the sun gone down. How about 30 seconds, Rashida?
Okay, so for me, I will end by saying, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but the results can free all. I think we have started the fight, but there is much work left to be done. And as young women and also young men, I think that we should take on the mantle and carry out that which our ancestors started. I also believe that you should find your identity and your identity in Christ. Build up your self-esteem and be aware, read more. Not everything that they tell you is as said. And so read your history and be familiar and just continue with life.
Right.
Yeah, well, for me, the greatest emancipation that we can ever experience is to be free in Christ and through Christ, so that we can rediscover our true selves or our true identity. Thank you. That's for me.
Alright, so in closing off, my girl Simone Smith-White, it was a really good, rich discussion here this evening. I am looking forward to whatever else to come. Remember, as we celebrate, in the spirit of celebrating, just remember the history. Remember the real reason for emancipation. And being emancipated means that we are going to go out there strong, representing and, fighting against the injustices of our people. Fighting does not mean with stick and stones and gun, but we can also speak up and advocate against the injustices being meted out against our people. Let us continue on the path of preserving, encouraging, embracing, and just really acknowledging that the education that we get, education pathway, our 40-hour work week, all these things that we would have inherited should not have been in vain, because a lot of people have fought hard and have died because of these very things. So let us go forward from 1834 into the 2000 and beyond, knowing who we are, what God says we are, and what we should be. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.
Given from our Father's hand, to Him we give the glory and praise continually. So give thanks and praises. We are 25, though we did walk through the valley of the shadow of death.